Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our first panel discussion centered around Native arts, culture, and technology. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Of course, please make sure you silence your phones. Do keep the aisles empty as well. And as I pointed out earlier, if you joined us for Ty's wonderful performance, we have exits to the left, exits to the right. We have had a slight change in the programming, and I would like to introduce our panelists: Nolan Altvater, who will be moderating, Dwayne Toma, and Ty Defoe. And I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves and just say a little bit about each of you, and then we will get going. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Dungak, Glasigolpin, Nolan Altvater and Dully Wiz, Beskuramaka Nil, Nujeo Zibayig, Naga Benaweb Scoudig Nuignil. My name's Nolan Altvater. I am Passamaquoddy from Zibayig. However, I'm currently residing in what is now Orono, Maine, with my Penobscot relatives nearby. And you might see that there's been a change in the programming. In this seat was supposed to be my friend Emma Purley. Unfortunately, she had some family events come up that she had to travel back to her homelands. Really big shoes to fill, but hoping that I can do as best as I can, kind of on the improv here. And certainly, if you do not know who Emma Purley is, please do look her up on social media or the internet to see her amazing work and the amazing art that she does as well. Would like to bring her into the space still. She did leave me with some questions, so looking forward to this conversation. My background is I work for the Passamaquoddy Tribe's Historic Preservation Office and Cultural Heritage Museum at Madocmigug, which is our sister reservation inland for the Passamaquoddy community. And I am also a visual artist, a very interdisciplinary space. I work in the mediums of film, photography, and collage. So really looking forward to talking about the role of technology in our communities and also as an individual expression. But before we get into that, I'd love for each of you to introduce yourself and maybe say a little bit about your backgrounds.
Diliwi is Dwayne Toma. Nujay Auzibayig Nagademanakmigug. Gamajnolida has Eliud Bedja Yud Bemkiskak. Gamajnolida has. Eli Nemiulag Yud Gila Yud Bemkiskak. Eli Naxidiug, which Kukwebiolidi Tidyud Nidabig. Gamaj Nolida has. Samayeli Naxid Nidabig. My name is Dwayne Toma from the Passamaquoddy tribe. I am currently the director and the curator for the Passamaquoddy tribe. And what I said in my language was, what an honor for me to be here with you and also to see all your faces here today. And I said that you're all our friends. And it's really remarkable to see you all here and supporting Indigenous issues because we have a lot of work to do together here. So I just want to say that again. We have a lot of work to do together here today. And I really want to express that to you, each and every one of you, and join us on the sacred path of changing the narrative. So thank you very much for being here.
Bonjour, everyone. Whoa, here I am in a chair sitting down. Unusual for me. Ty Defoe, Indigenous cause. Waswaganin in Dunjaba, Magizan in Dodem, Oniotiaga in Dunjaba. Hello, my name is Ty Defoe. My native name is Gijig. I'm of the Anishinaabe and Oneida tribal nations, and I go by Ty or he, him, his, or just Ty works also. I consider myself an interdisciplinary artist, working at the cross-section of story change and narrative justice, as well as bringing joy, spreading seeds, planting flowers, bringing the people together. I think it's really, really important, and the past few years have been working a lot in technology, digital media technology, thinking about ways to connect to the future by honoring the past. And so also, I'm also thinking and always holding the Mother Nature at the center to create rematriation around some of these tools that are provided for for artists and Indigenous people. So it's an honor to be here, truly, and an honor to be on this panel with such prolific individuals and artists themselves. So I'm really looking forward to the dialogue.
So as I mentioned, Emma did leave us with some questions, so I'll be working off from those what she left us. And I'm going to start with you, Dwayne, specifically with the work that you have supported within the Passamaquoddy communities around our wax cylinder recordings. So, you know, when we're talking about technology and Indigenous peoples, there's also a history where technology has been used on us as well. And Dwayne has been a part of this project for the return of our wax cylinder recordings. So the Passamaquoddy people were the first people ever to be recorded in 1890 by Jesse Walter Fuchs, who borrowed the phonograph from Thomas Edison, who invented it. And Dwayne has been a part of translating all of the recordings through that in working with the Library of Congress to also do it in a way where that knowledge is also returned to us as well, since it's lived in colonial archives since they've been recorded. So Dwayne, these recording devices are often used in the service of empire or extraction. You know, these people are coming and taking knowledge away from us using this technology. And considering that Fuchs was a non-Indigenous anthropologist, Dwayne, how do you think about this early use of technology as a form of surveillance or as an interruption to Passamaquoddy life?
Well, first, can you hear me all right? Well, first and foremost, before I answer that question, I just want to give you guys, bring you up to speed as to how this actually started, so that way we can get into a little bit more detail. Just so you know that we were actually the first Indigenous people in the entire world. Let me say this again. We were the first Indigenous people in the entire world to be recorded on Thomas Edison's wax cylinder machine. I want to take you down this path real quick just to give you a brief synopsis of how this took place. First and foremost, they were invited by a gentleman by the name of Wallace Brown and Helen Brown. Wallace Brown and Helen Brown were Indian agents. Does anybody know what an Indian agent is? Well, those of you that do not know what an Indian agent is, basically an Indian agent was really an individual that came in and took total power and control over the indigenous populations. So you got to remember that in the beginning of time, they thought that, these indigenous people, they couldn't possibly govern themselves. After all, they've only been here for 12,000 years. So we'll send in an Indian agent to solve their problems. As you all know, not many problems were solved. So this indigenous knowledge was kept in these institutions for a very, very long time, for 130 years. So all this intellectual property is very, very important to our people to continue revitalizing language, culture. It's not just revitalizing culture. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. This is just a glimpse of the work that we need to do. We're just scraping the surface here, folks. But with people like yourselves that having an understanding and educating yourselves on true history, not twistery. And a lot of my friends say that, and I hear that a lot, twistery. So I use that now because it's exactly what it is. So this intellectual property really had a really major effect on us, because now I'm actually able to share songs and stories of our people. Not only that, but we'll be able to share Oldak Ewagan. And Oldak Ewagan in our language means ceremony. So you got to remember that these are all systematically designed to eradicate the people, language, spirituality, also neglecting their responsibility to our mother. So it's really important that we share this information to you, because there's a lot of concepts that we want to share with you.
Willie and Dwayne. And Ty, for those, we have a lot of elders in the crowd. So Ty just performed, if y'all forgot already. And in your performance, you're what I really appreciated is not just how visual it is, but how it really challenges, I feel like, a lot of stereotypical notions of what Indigenous art is or ought to be. And with that, how do you define Native Futurism in your creative practice, and how has it evolved through your upcoming projects, such as Skeleton Canoe and Cosmic Bloom, Shape of Breath?
Yeah. So thank you so much, and thank you for what you said about, just going to the past to think about the future, because a lot of Indigenous futurism or Anishinaabe futurism or Oneida futurism, as I'm viewing it, we're, the collective that I work with, All My Relations Collective, we're just amplifying a lot of various ancient knowledge and teachings that our elders have handed down. So in the process of making some of the projects, it's a lot of listening circles or talking circles. So we're really trying to galvanize some of the stories that we're hearing, some of the stories that may have been forgotten. For example, with some of the projects you mentioned, such as Cosmic Bloom, The Shape of Breath, actually takes place with this character that was created in a VR headset that sort of talks about star knowledge or the stars, right? We're not making something up here that doesn't really speak to maybe what some folks have handed down through orational storytelling. But what I'm doing and the collective of us are doing are using star knowledge and star power to bring forth what folks have already known, what elders have already known, what lives inside young children even without them even knowing it. It's inside of the blood memory. And so we're utilizing the art form of symbolic literacy to re-invoke what may have been forgotten so that it can continue on to the future. So some of the images you see behind you, such as the deconstructed canoe, that's actually a birch bark puppet that's used during the skeleton canoe piece. So we're using this, these shapes and these objects as relatives on the stage to tell stories in terms of the technology. The Cosmic Bloom piece is interesting piece because it talks about stars. And what it is, it's gathering people together to talk about your relationality to the stars. So when people back at home in community or in other places are talking about the stars, everyone has a story to tell about the stars, right? So we have a 4-phase process by doing it. We're gathering the stories to talk about it, and we're sifting through and reorganizing it so that we can leave a map for people to pick up. So if you go on the interwebs, right, you can go on the search on the internet, and you can click on a large star map like a star Gaia, and click on a star and hear a story maybe of your great-great-great-great-grandmother, for example, right? But thinking about that for the future. So in the future, someone, right, several years into the future could click on a star in the sky and hear your story about a star that you told today in 2025, right? So in terms of futurism, really thinking about how do we maintain this work ethically? Are we creating opportunities for new practice and growth as it relates to Indigenous futurism?
And I think that really highlights the role that technology plays in Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous communities. We're not using it in the sense of how Western knowledge systems might use technology, which is really based on a logic of like extraction and destruction. And whereas for us, it's really thinking intergenerationally and how sustainable that has to be. I think that shows up in your work like incredibly. So Willie Wood for sharing. And Dwayne, again, kind of thinking about, the aspect of intergenerational work and how much listening that is involved in those processes. Do you mind speaking to the role that listening plays in your work? And how does this differ from how non-Indigenous researchers listened in 1890, especially given their intent to document Indigenous language and culture while actually working to, in a lot of ways, eradicate us?
Well, I want to share with my personal experience with listening. I want to share with you as a young boy, I would sit for hours and listen to my elders. I remember many times they'd play games at night. and they played, many of you may know this, Pokino. So the elders used to play Pokino, and I would sit around and listen to them, not just during the night, during the day as well, all day long. For me, it was like, those of you that like music, you're just hungry for music. You like listening to music because, as you all know, music ties us all together. So it was like music to my ears when I would hear the language being spoken. They captivated me in such a spiritual way. And so I spent a lot of time with them, and also listening was so important to me. It was very important to me because it gave me all this knowledge that I could share and continue, especially now. It's even getting emotional talking about it because of the work that I have in front of me and the work that we all have together. So I'm here for a very short time, but I certainly want to impact people to listen. Listen. Not only to the language, but listen to each other. Coming from here, right here, and listening, and taking the time. A lot of times we get stretched out like a deer hide. And we really need to start focusing on listening and paying attention. We need to pay attention more than ever now, if you guys all know what I mean. Thank you.
Willie Win Dwayne. And I want to sort of shift the conversation sort of towards sovereignty. And people may be really familiar with that word, but maybe only think of it in the context of politics or legislation or governments and how we govern ourselves. But Ty, I'd like to start a conversation with you in terms of like, how do you understand Indigenous visual sovereignty within digital spaces, especially in the terms of representation, cultural integrity, and responsibility?
Sure. So some of the ways that I'm thinking about, digital sovereignty and some of the symbolic literacy is an example I can give is the study of, I don't know how many folks know about the two-row wampum that comes from the Haudenosaunee people of 1613. This 2 rows of how we need to live life and attune ourselves to these small little beads, oftentimes found on bracelets, oftentimes seen on posters, oftentimes seen in various museums, right? But some of these wampum belts actually are visual representations about how we need to live. Now, the 2-row wampum, for example, is, I use that in a lot of my work, or in Anishinaabe culture, I'll use some of like the floral designs. And whenever I use them in a performance, a theatrical performance, or otherwise, it's really important that I know what exactly these symbols are meaning, right? So, for example, the 2-row wampum, right? It talks about how we need to, sort of not cross paths, but we can respect each other coming from different cultures, and how that needs to live on into the future. And so explaining that kind of visual sovereignty also to a cross-racial, cross-cultural team of artists, right, is really important, because it's not just me, myself making it. It's a team of people, of a director, producer, folks that are working in the digital realm of collaging or clipping out little images, needing to really understand and recognize what some of these small symbols can mean, but also the liberation in a small symbol. So it reminds me of, a lot of people are wearing their beautiful earrings today, etc., right? I want to know who made the earring. Where did that thread come from? What's the story behind the earring that you're making, right? So these symbols show up constantly, and we're every day sort of trying to understand and get back some of that intellectual property of the mind, of the heart, of that artistry that belonged to people. So some of the visual aids that I'm working with really talk a lot about that, whether it's on the internet, using tools of AI. I know, very scary, right? Things happening, but also could be kind of beautiful, because at the end of the day, there are people who are on the other sides of, whether it's a machine. There are people who are on the other sides of the river. There are people who are unfolding the chairs for us to sit in, right? So this idea of listening and creating visual sovereignty is in process for everybody in that room to understand what that symbol means when I'm getting on the stage to perform, for example, if you've participated in a theater piece, that the person in the booth is part of the circle and understands what certain symbolic literacy means, because someone might ask them and might need to learn about some of the work we're putting forth. So by process, I think there's a type of sovereignty in that I'm trying to get at with teams that I'm working with. And I could go on about this subject matter because it's so interesting. Some of the visuals you saw earlier today were even trees, thinking about birch bark trees, for example. There was a time when I was a young person where I went out and I just got this knife as a gift, for example, right? I got this knife and I went out into the forest and I was like, oh, wow, birch bark. Here I get to learn about it. I got really excited. And I started into the forest and I cut down birch bark from the tree. And I was really proud of myself for getting all that bark, just like I was instructed, wind it up, put my medicine down, started talking to the trees, started really listening to the trees. Oh, they really want me to do this. And I come back and the next day, my uncle comes into the house and he's like, who went out there and cut down all that birch from the trees? And I was like, I did. Of course I did. Like real pompous, very excited to share my story. And come to find out there was this family of trees that I actually cut a little bit too deep in the wigwasi, into the birch bark, right? I cut too deep because I wasn't listening the week before that you're only supposed to take, right, the top layer of the birch tree. Now, this is a sad story that I'm telling, a very comical one, right, of a child learning some of these some of the things but to this day, I will never, ever forget this story about how I kind of turned a strip of birch bark trees black, right, this family of trees. And now today I work so much with birch bark in puppetry that I do. So in thinking about sovereignty between people, I also think about sovereignty and digital sovereignty with birch bark, because now I use birch bark we do our etchings on the birch bark, and then we take a picture of that bark, right? So there's a whole harvesting and gathering and talking about how materiality has its own sovereignty, and how now as an adult, now I need to listen to that. So that was a big lesson for me to learn.
Well, for me, sovereignty when it comes to intellectual property, I'm thinking about how we get there. And to me, it's really about building these relationships and friendships. And also, it really helps when you have the best intellectual property attorney in the country. So I just wanted to emphasize that, because we got to understand systems and how systems operate. Once we get to understand the systems and the ideologies and methodologies in these systems, we're able to actually get a deeper understanding, and also collectively how we really need to get working together on these narratives.
And Ty, you were talking about kind of the communal aspect to our knowledge systems and how that shows up in visual art, in terms of like, not only is like the way the processes in which we harvest materials or the stories that we tell, that's coming from a people and homelands and specific people in specific homelands. But also the fact that the materials that we're working with, we've always adapted to how we use them. Like that sovereignty has always been a normative practice for us in our storytelling, because we need to do that to survive. And I'm just really appreciative how that shows up in your work. And another aspect of with knowledge being community-based and coming from a people and from homelands, I feel like as Native artists, or working in the areas of work that we do, we're also concerned about, since it's community-based, we also need to assure that our people have access to these stories. And Dwayne, I'd like to sort of ask you about the project that our communities did with the development of the Passamaquoddy language app. And that is being part of a broader revitalization and accessibility of Indigenous languages and memory through technology.
Yeah, this is a very important project because first and foremost, that's what we want is access. We want to give people access, not just to language, but we want access, like, look at where we're at right now. We want access to these mountains. We want access to sweetgrass. We want access to horns that we use in ceremonies. We want access to medicines. We need to do that collectively. She is our mother. We have a relationship with her. She's not a resource. It's a deeper concept. Long before these concepts that come around here. And we want to change that, and we want to teach you. We want to share this knowledge with you in a good way. And that's why listening is so important.
Would you say access with your storytelling in your work? Like, how does making it accessible to community show up into your practice?
Sure. I'll talk about accessibility because of, right, a little bit of passed down historic trauma, right? It happens within many communities, and specifically even in my own communities back home, whether it's urban or on tribal lands, right? Being a person who identifies as trans or two-spirit or indigiqueer, for example, this systematic access sometimes because of religiosity, because of the system has kept people away from ancient knowledge. All of that's based on boarding schools. It's based on fear, based on the unknown. And so at the same breath, the other thing that I'm holding when I'm thinking about Indigenous future is that there has to be a way and an accessibility towards it, because at the same time, we're holding such rich, ancient resiliency, right? And these two things, both passed on historic trauma as well as passed on resiliency, can function and happen. And I think, working a lot with trans community, indigiqueer communities, that this access towards language and culture, it's like, well, this is just a part of life, of who groups of individuals are, and there's a place in that circle for it. So creating access to me by way of listening, by way of centering those who are most vulnerable, those who need access to the actual knowledge and information, predominantly, oftentimes, I think, artists, people who are out in the woods listening to the rivers, the lakes, the streams, who have undoubtedly, with a doubt, been radically putting in the efforts of, radical change. Like folks like yourself on the stage, I think there's something really, really, really important about creating access, and because there's no time like the present. And I was really feeling what you said about this idea, the urgency. We only have so much time to live. It is urgent. It's an emergency, essentially, that this access towards community building, towards radical care, to centering those most vulnerable in communities all across Turtle Island, across these states, across these lands, are so, so important. So in my process, I like to think about it as the creating opportunities for new practice and growth, right? So like, sure, we have these old systems, but also those can change. Change is a good thing. Change is scary, but it's actually a good thing. And so I'm actually ask a lot of people who I work with and invite them to change, because you are going to be uncomfortable. If you are comfortable creating beauty, you might need to re-examine why you're so comfortable in something so beautiful. Someone had to sacrifice their knowledge, their work, their labor, so that you could enjoy that beauty, right? Whether it's someone like a groundskeeper, right? Someone to clean the water. And you all know that, and I'm sure you all have mothers or aunties or grandmothers. Look at these folks who are rematriating, a lot of this ancient knowledge, but also just so that we can show up and live every day as human beings, right? So those are just some practices and things that I'm thinking about today.
I just want to share with you real quick the story because he's bringing a lot of things up in my mind, what happened. And I just want to share with you a real quick story. It's going to take a couple of minutes, but I just want to share with you, it's very important about listening. I just spoke with a Maliseet friend of mine this morning, and he was up in the mountains, and he got lost. And he shared me with his experience about when he was lost out there. He was walking probably 40 miles, trying to find his way. He kept going up the mountain, kept coming back down. He was lost. He didn't know what to do. So he went by the water, listening to the water. The water was soothing him. He saw these enormous birch trees. He never seen such big birch trees before, deep in the forest. I just want to share with you the connection that I'm talking about. And that is being present and connecting with that water. Connecting with that fire. He built a fire. That fire helped him get through this. The sounds of the water soothed his, his fear. Take the time to go in to the forest. When you get home, in your own yard, take your shoes off. Take your socks off. Feel our mother. Feel our mother. You'll feel that energy. It's called connecting. Let's think about those things, because it's all healing. It's bizon in our language, and bizon is medicine.
Thank you, Dwayne. I just wanted to note that we have a 5-minute warning, or before we're done. But I also want to ask our volunteers to start collecting the questions from the audience, and then we'll bring those forward, and we'll move into Q&A here in approximately 5 minutes. Thank you.
I still got questions for you, Dwayne. Don't worry. And as they're collecting the questions for you, I'm wondering if we can quickly speak about the role of social media and how social media connects us within our communities, and how it might even cause deeper divides within communities and nationhood. And so how can we, in Ty's words, believe in technology and the positive possibilities of social media?
Well, I think communication is so important. It depends on how you handle it. That's so important. So I think communication in the media is very, very important to reach people. I use the media a lot, as you guys all know. And I use it in a very, very nice way to reach people. And by the way, if you're interested, get on Zibuyik Museum website. Once again, SIPAYIK website, and you'll see a lot of the work that we're doing, because we want to reach people. That's what we want to do, and that's how we're using that media, to be able to reach people and to collaborate and to build these friendships and relationships. But once again, that also can hurt us in a lot of ways, because as you all know, politics plays a big role in a lot of that stuff. It's really bad. So I just try to stay away from all that stuff as much as possible, and stay on this path of unification and building these friendships and relationships. And so I use the media in a lot to be able to educate people, and that's so important.
I'm surprised you're not going live on Facebook right now.
Let me share with you guys how I use this live. And I love when you said that, because you're absolutely correct. Listen to this. Let me share with you a real quick story, okay? And I know we only got a couple minutes, but down in Eastport, Maine, right? It was a misunderstanding because the kids were having graduation. They were having these caps, and all the kids wanted to put beadwork on their caps, and the policymakers were saying, no way, you can't put those on them caps. No, because an old policy said that they were defacing them a long time ago, and this kind of fell in, I guess, in that category or whatever. But anyway, I went directly to the principal's office at 8 o'clock a.m., by the way. And I was waiting there, and she comes in, and I says, good morning. She says, good morning. I says, you probably know why I'm here, right? She goes, absolutely. So I told her, I said, listen, I says, let's change this now. I said, these children want to express themselves culturally. This is who they are. Okay, so let's change this now. That woman, she's a leader. She's the principal at Shed High School, and she's a leader. She immediately changed it. She came from here, and she actually was listening to me, right? So these things, right, that's how we do these things. So when I got done speaking with her, I told her, I'm going on live right outside the school right now. I says, because we need to stop this now, and we need to be able to mitigate this now and put end to this now. They changed it. When I saw pictures on Facebook of my granddaughter wearing her piece all beaded, it almost made me cry, and it's almost getting emotional just talking about it now. So my granddaughter was able to express herself and who she is. And she stood her ground because she told me, she goes, I don't care if they said no, I was going to wear it anyway. To me, that's resilience. And that's stepping up and doing the right thing. Woo!
Tahoe, Willie Win, Dwayne. All right, I think we have some questions here. All right, this is a good question because I feel it's something that we think about on a daily basis, and that's not by choice. But within Indigenous arts, culture, and technology, we often find ourselves working within colonial and Western systems. And what does a more, quote, balanced system look like to you?
Yeah, I guess I'll take this. So for me, recently, there was this little thing called Pandemic Lovato that happened. Yeah. Y'all know what I'm talking about, 2021, 22. So the world shut down, and it was like, whoa, oh my gosh, right? As an artist, I currently live in New York City and currently travel very often for work, so things shut down, etc. And the reason why I'm using this example is because it relates to technology. A friend of mine actually was like, Ty, you just gotta keep making your work. You gotta keep on going. So they sent me a box across the country through the mail, and it was a box of moving sensors from an Xbox video game set. And I took those sensors and I hooked them up to the computer and in my apartment, and I did this whole entire performance with one of my roommates. So it was like a one-person show. But however, with this digital media, I was able to broadcast across Facebook, across TikTok, across YouTube to so many thousands of tribal communities out west, all the way to the Dene Navajo Nation who tuned in through some of their channels to watch this performance. And so that was the first time for me where my work, because I was working both with traditional art forms such as flute playing and native dancing, etc., I was able to pair together some of this new technology so it reached thousands and thousands and thousands of youth across the country, in Canada, and all the way into Hawaii and all the places that I traveled. So for me, what was interesting was because of Zoom, because of other ways of connecting with folks, we're able to have folks stationed at different pop-up digital venues to then really be part of the performance or part of the show, a part of connecting. And also, I got a very large grant from a mutual aid fund at the time that paid it directly to artists, right? Didn't have to, right, operate in a scarcity mindset, but I was able to purchase some headsets for people. I was also able to pay just myself to other artists so that they could fully understand the technology. And I would hire for elders a young person to bike to their apartment to get all of their technology set up so that they could tune into the performance. So for me, this idea of sovereignty, of paying to the people, because technology should be for the people, I would hire an intergenerational and interdisciplinary team to utilize some of this technology. Because now you have, right, young children doing this with their finger, swiping, right? You can only imagine, right, thinking about that 50, 60 years from now, what is going to happen with this digital tech media and this technology. So yeah, really important. So for me, it's both utilizing a Western model framework as well as a futuristic one as it relates to this question.
And Dwayne, I don't know if you want to answer the same question. It was talking about finding the balance of working within both a Western framework and, say, a Passamaquoddy framework, and trying to find what does balanced look like for you in those contexts.
Well, I think it's really important to recognize, first of all, gijiji tundamaguji beji, gijiji tunstamaili ayin. If we know where we come from, we'll know where we're going. So once we get an understanding of systematics, once you get an understanding of the indoctrination and the assimilation, as well as we have to ourselves, as Indigenous people, have to decolonize ourselves. So once we get to understand that process and to be able to continue these traditions and speaking our language, I want to say that so much to those of you that are language speakers, even if it's French or whatever language that you speak. Language is so important. That is how we view the world. So through the language is what we really need to start focusing on and coming together and building this. It takes time to build these things. I mean, look how long it's taken to dismantle it. It's going to take some time to recover. But we're getting there. We're working on that more and more.
And Ty, this question is specifically for you, but I think speaks to sort of the embodied nature of our knowledge, and our knowledge never being separate from us as a community, but also us individually. So I'd like to ask the question, is there historic precedent for two-spirit people?
Here I am. Yeah, it's yes and always, right? And I am looking for a future where, Western society, because of colonization, it's just a part of the culture. It's just a part of the circle. And so if folks that came earlier to some of the stories I was telling, it's a really interesting thing. And I feel like maybe signaling to the folks that are really listening to what Dwayne said is I didn't use any gendered pronouns in any of the speeches that I was giving. I said folks or young person or people, right? So in thinking about language and really listening, a lot of our languages across Turtle Island, including Anishinaabe, speak about they're animating something, right? To create a description towards what something is doing, and how something is, or creating the essence. So when I think about like two-spirit peoples, when I think about indigiqueerness, I'm thinking even about the evolution of two-spirit individuals, right? Which that language term only came out in the 90s, for example, in Canada, where someone in an Anishinaabe circle said, I have an idea for this. And the idea is Nijmani Tuwag, two-spirit, because they were trying to think about what sexuality is or what gender is, And so now people are thinking about indigiqueer identity, right? Because there's gender, but there's also sexuality and sexual orientation, but also relationship to the land, right? In Western society, I was just watching a YouTube the other day. Someone's like, oh, there's also now ecosexuals out there, right? So just kind of thinking about that, and what relationality is and what relationship is. So two-spirit identity, I think, has existed. way a long time ago. I think it's just because of systematic colonization that has made something operate within a type of binary, right? Good or bad, yes or no, this or that. But when you look out at nature, it doesn't happen that way. I was just yesterday watching a sunset, and I was taking a picture on my cell phone, and out pops a deer from the water. I was like, wow, like amazing, right? Just some of the phenomenology of what nature brings. And so I think indigiqueerness, we can learn a lot from nature because it's giving us the answers already, right? That's both looking at the past, that's futurism, and that's like queer identity, essentially. So that's something, also people change over the course of time, right? People change, and I mean, I don't need to tell this audience, right? Our bodies change, our minds change, our thoughts change. So why not leave space for the human condition to evolve into your highest human potential to build relationalities with whoever you're interfacing with? And to me, that is two-spirit or indigiqueer identity in particular.
Gichi Williwun, thank you very much to both of you. I believe
We have reached, excuse me, the end of our Q&A. Thank you all for joining us. Please, another round of applause for Nolan, Dwayne, and Ty.